So since we're all here, I'll just open the meeting then?
Yeah.
All right, so, let's open the meeting and what is time is it? It is, almost 7 o'clock, right on time. So, you were gonna say? I interrupted?
I was just going to say a lot of our business tonight is going to fall under the category of information that was not reasonably expected to be
Yes.
known by the chair 48 hours in advance.
Not 48 hours, maybe last night.
So we had a select board meeting last night, and the landscape looks very different.
Mhm.
So we should talk into that.
Okay, so I know that we have something that we wanna talk about, a transfer. I'm not sure what order would be the best discussion here.
Do you wanna get all of your business out of the way first?
Yeah, why don't we
Okay,
do that?
perfect.
And then we can sit and argue till midnight if we want, but.
Right.
I can only argue till 8.
So this is the scanner for the planning board. They're requesting a transfer from the reserve fund of $7,600 so that they can purchase a scanner. If you remember correctly, we were talking about a $12,000 purchase.
Right, so we started at 50K, and what are we what's our balance right now?
Okay, so you started at 50K. You did some transfers for the treasurer's office for tax
Mhm.
title.
Mhm.
Last time you met, you transferred 10,000 for the snow and ice deficit. So that puts you at about 32K at this point,
Okay.
about 32 even.
Okay, and so now they're asking for 7,600 for the scanner.
Right.
So hadn't we asked for specifications on this to like look it over ourselves at some point or get them in front of us? I know we're actually ended on that, but
That
we're
didn't
just kind of
happen.
rubber stamping. I'd like something to kind of review.
Right. Now, I thought that they did send some specifications and that was sent, that to
Let me
you.
check.
That would have been about a month ago or something like that. I could be wrong. Could be having one of
And it
these
was, and it was
false memories.
from
Planning board.
planning board?
Would have been Jim Maximowski in particular.
That does not ring a bell.
Well,
to
the
be
other
quite
thing I
honest with
thought
you.
was, I thought it was coming out of our fund for a little while, and then I thought you were gonna put it into capital.
Right, so they changed their mind.
Oh.
So they're an elected body, they can do that.
And is there a reason why they changed their mind, just because they want it faster? I
They
see.
don't wanna wait until November.
Hmm.
I think it could be a summer project that way.
Yeah.
I think
Sure.
that's part of it.
And will they be able to purchase it and get it in, like, what's the turnaround time for them getting it?
It should be off the shelf kind of purchasing. I know that I was answering some of the procurement questions last week on this, so normal delivery time for a piece of machinery like that.
Well, the other thing is, I mean, it seems like we have plenty, so, I mean, that's fine, but, I mean, I'm worried about other things coming up with this new purchase that we're looking at. I know we're gonna need 5.
Let me tell you about the other things. that
Yeah,
are
how much,
coming
what's
up.
the
Yeah.
total?
Alright, so last night the select board asked if we could transfer 5,000 from the reserve fund over to the fire department budget for the soil evaluation of the
Mhm.
Hynoski property.
Okay.
Just as a background. Now, that's the only, those are the only major transfers that I'm aware of from the reserve account. There's another line-to-line transfer for the HVAC project, but.
So this is the only thing that's coming out of these two are the only things coming out of 32K.
That's the only thing that I can,
Why is the select board, I don't know, I missed the meeting last night, asking for $5,000?
so there's a 9-acre parcel of land that, at the intersection of Stockbridge and River Drive, that is, up for sale. The town has right of first refusal, because it's under which they receive a reduced tax bill.
Is this the property that came to town meeting
Yes,
and the finance committee voted against it,
yes,
and so did the town?
yes. It was coming in at about 500,000. It was an opportunity, but there was no plan for that opportunity. And so it did not receive the support of finance committee and subsequently the town meeting. It's now on the market for $400,000, and you have the right of first refusal on that property.
What's the plan now?
That might be the place for the fire substation.
So Terry, I was
So-
very much against, at first with you about that. But one of the things that came up is it was gonna cost $375,000 to fix the soil, to fix the land of where they currently want it. So I started to think, well, if it's gonna cost $375 for that, or you can get $400, only if the soil, that's what this is for, to see if the soil is good soil that they could build on it. Am I correct on this?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. So we're talking either 400 to get nine acres, or you're saying we would spend 375 just to fix that piece of property to
Of
keep
course,
that.
we don't know if the new property would also cost more money because we don't know what the soil is like there. That's
Right.
what this
That's what this is.
$5,000
That's what this is for.
But there's no actual plans, and everything that we've been going to town meeting with, the senior center originally didn't have any plans, this fire substation did have plans, and now it's coming back again and again, and we don't have all our i's dotted and t's crossed, so there's no actual plan for this, it's an what if.
Right.
So why wait? To me, it's wasting $5,000 of money when we don't know or actually know what we're gonna do with it. Or if we can even afford to purchase it, or if it
Right,
would fly with town
but
meeting.
if you so do you think you would rather put the 375 into what you do know?
Well, that's not my decision personally,
No.
that's the town's decision to decide that. What I'm saying is that we have a lot of things thrown at us lately. We can't even balance a budget.
Right.
Without relying on what ifs, and the senior center is gonna be asking for more money again. These are a lot of what ifs, no actual facts. And if it was me personally, I would rather put money into a piece of property that the town already owns, but that's personal. That's not financial, looking at it from a financial standpoint. Looking at it from a financial standpoint, you got a lot of things that are not, they're all what ifs.
See, my feeling is this would be the cheaper way for that project at this point. So I was thinking at first, I wasn't for the 500 because we have a property that we own. Why would we not use something that we own and not spend an extra 5,000? But now that it's come up and it's going to cost 375, my thinking is, okay, well, if we sell that piece, we would make up more than the 25,000. We would gain the extra piece of land, and we could do something with the land.
Okay, so now it's discussion of fire substation. Before, when they were looking to purchase it, it was for it was gonna house the DPW,
Sure.
it was gonna house multiple things.
Fields, right?
Fields, whatever, it's still what if, there's no actual plan.
Well, that's
what it
because
is.
the fire station doesn't need that much.
Right, the fire station only needs an acre to an acre and a half, and the
Which we
property's
have
11.
which we already have, and the North Hadley fields, what they're
Right.
looking for already, they came to the town, they voted on that area for that piece, that property doesn't owe the town anything. So,
Right.
$300,000 to, maybe if the town decides to, I mean, that's up to the townspeople.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm, again, you don't have a balanced budget and we're doing a lot of what ifs.
Yeah. Well, it's not that it was all these things that passed. I agree that we don't have a lot of money to do a lot of extra things, but these things have all passed. So at this point, we have to
They passed for North Hadley, not for a new piece of property.
yeah, but they passed, and so what are you not gonna, so what are our options? Not
This new
to,
piece of property hasn't passed, it failed.
well, it failed at that time, but also it failed not knowing what you were gonna put it on. And not knowing that you were gonna use the fire station for that, and not knowing that it was gonna cost us $375 extra.
No, I think they thought about putting the fire station there, the DPW,
They
and
ta-
multiple things.
Yeah,
They did talk about multiple things.
they did talk about
There are
multiple
what
things.
ifs,
Right, right.
what ifs. I'm saying if we had the $400,000, yeah, that's a great thing, but you got a lot of things out there there's no guaranteed funding for, and I think you need to get more solid facts. Again, you need to give the town people more
Well,
information.
I think one of the solid facts that you would be gaining would be the soil profile, which would tell you whether this is a suitable piece of property or not.
If it's not, then that kind of
The only
washes
reason
a
that
lot.
it is
Then it
brought
wouldn't
up is
work.
because of the North Hadley Hall, which probably, they didn't come to us and ask us for any money in advance, which they probably should have, to run all those tests at North Hadley, whatever, they didn't do that. So now I'm just saying that before I further it, I would want to know that the town people actually wanna buy it.
So do we have anything on paper from the last time this piece of land was looked at and its potential uses and everything, besides having to dig through video footage of old meetings? Cause that'd make me more comfortable if everyone was unanimously against it. I don't see a reason in putting more money into this, but if there's even a debate and it's a possibility, I see this as a small amount of money with the potential of a huge
Is it?
savings or at least value.
It's fine, it'll be
So I'd
fine
like
right there.
to-
It's good.
Well, the thing
You
is,
got an
like I
idea,
said, it was
you
much
read it.
different. I mean, we weren't gonna, the thought was you have a free piece of land that you already own. It's not free, you own it. Or you have something you're gonna spend $500,000. I think most people think, let's use the one we own.
Sure, but if there was, what I'm looking for in those old discussions, is there some reason or reasoning as to why we couldn't use that land for all these, proposed projects, or did it just come down to we already had the land? Cause that's a very different case for me, right?
So I think you asked if we have any independent information about that parcel. There is a study from 1943 that looks at all the soil profiles in the valley.
Would there be much in minutes from various committees that
No,
looked at this land
no, I
and
would
had
go to
this
the
discussion?
1943 profile.
Okay.
I also wanna say that the what ifs are always worrisome, but the town is growing and having access to this piece of property could be beneficial to us in the future.
You're still gonna have to bring it to town vote to see if they support purchasing it.
Well, and so this
So why
$5,000 tells us whether or not that land is useful for anything, right? So
Well,
we
why
have,
don't you
we're
give
getting the
them-
information that you want by doing that.
No, cause you're spending $5,000 of taxpayers' dollars, and we're gonna be going back to them and saying, we don't have a balanced budget, and we're trying to figure out how we can get IT and everything else done in this town. So we're spending $5,000 on a piece of property we don't own. If they wanna do that, give them the opportunity at fall town meeting.
Yeah, but they.
Or actually, there's an August meeting coming up, from what I understand, we're gonna spend $2,500 on it.
Right, but the problem is that the right of refusal runs out, so we can't drag our feet. We have to either do something or not do something. We can't wait for town meeting.
Okay, so then the
David, can you go over
5,000
the dates of all
Sure.
that?
So we received the notice of the intent to sell the chapter 61A land on May 18th. That started a clock ticking of 120 days. You have 120 days from May 18th, so call it day 34 right now, something like that. I may be off by 1 or 2 days. So you have an additional 90 days in order to get this deal done. You have to hold a public hearing, which you have scheduled for July 12th. You have to exercise your right of first refusal in that 120-day period. You have additional 90 days after that, so it's 210 days total to clinch the deal. Talked to the council this morning. It was better to do the deal within the 120 days, but there are instances where you were able to do it in the
And
90 days.
Do you know what date is the 120th day?
120th day would be June, July, August, sometime in mid-September. Called September 18th.
Okay, so we gotta know before October 5th.
Well, we were presented with this same opportunity when it was at 500,000. So we didn't act on it then either. Now we're being presented with the same opportunity, now we're down 400,000.
Yes, but the situation has changed some, right? Because we know that the property by the North Hadley Town Hall is gonna cost more money than we thought it was going to because of the soil issues. So now it makes it a more of an even split, plus you're gaining 9
Well,
acres of land
when-
to use for whatever you want to use it
When you
for.
voted for the senior center, you didn't realize that they were gonna come back and ask for more money either.
But that's a different issue.
Why is it?
Because now we're talking about this soil here, we haven't gotten to the,
But it's
talking
all
about-
about the same principle, it's about funding, so it's the what ifs and you don't know.
But
Right?
again, that's why, to Tom's point, I'm looking for a history lesson. If when the conversation was had on this parcel of land, did we not act on it because the use was being fulfilled elsewhere by land we already had? Or did we not act on it because it was unsuitable for anything? And yes.
please.
I was present at that town meeting, and I believe other people were here were as well, so please keep me honest on this description. The Municipal Building Committee brought forward this article. They asked for a placeholder during the warrant creation process. Very light on the details. It was, there might be a parcel, we think there's a parcel coming, it looks like there's gonna be a parcel. David was, if I recall, a little bit frustrated during that process because it wasn't clear what was going to happen. Finally, the Municipal Building Committee came forward with the understanding that yes, indeed, this parcel was available for sale. I'm remembering 500,000, maybe
It was 500,000 at the time.
Right. And indeed, it was put in front of town meeting, and indeed, it was voted down, in part because the Municipal Building Committee, as the, typically the author or the requester of an article speaks to it. And I recall David Tudrin getting up at the microphone and kind of looking at the fellow members saying, we've got a little bit of a cart and a horse issue here. We know that this land is available, it seems like it might be a good deal for the acreage, but we aren't far enough along in the planning process to really know what the possible uses are. We've talked about the substation, we've talked about DPW use, future use down the road, we've talked about fields, and there was a lot of, more conversation about fields, quite frankly, than there was anything else. At that point, the police chief had gone on record saying that in his mind, was an excellent location for the substation.
The police
We had a-
chief or the fire chief?
I'm sorry, for the substation, the fire substation. Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
you said police chief, I thought.
oh, did I keep doing that? The fire chief said that he, so he did speak to that, but clearly there was no plan.
Right.
And I can't remember, I think I may even have gotten up and said something, but I mean, there was no plan for this property. There was a fair amount of people looking at each other on town meeting floor, and then it got voted down. But I truly do think it was primarily because there was an absence of a plan. It was the timing just wasn't right for that article, so I think to just unilaterally say the town clearly didn't want that property, I think that's misleading. Factually correct, the town voted it down, but I do think you have to look at the context of that discussion.
How many people were at that meeting? At that town meeting?
That
At least
meeting was-
100.
I think
Yeah, but
one.
I'm like, was it 102? I
No,
mean-
no,
It has
no,
to be
no,
100
no.
at all of them.
That was probably a solid town meeting, so
Yeah.
you probably were between 150 and 200 that night, which is, in the absence of something really exciting, that's
That's what happened.
that's normal, yeah.
In addition to what Molly has said, I was talking to one of the members in the municipal building committee, and they were talking about that piece of land and how it was gonna be awkward to bring it up again because the town had voted it down. And he said, we put it on as a place mark, and we should have withdrawn it before it got to the floor, and they didn't. And that's what all the confusion was about.
So thank you guys
Thank
for
you,
the
yeah.
history.
Yep.
So I do see this as an investment, not a, negligible amount, but an investment in seeing what this land can be used for and then opening up the discussion well before town meeting on what we could do with this. So I'd be in favor of it. How's everyone else feeling?
You wanna make a motion and vote?
Okay, I'd make a motion to do the transfer of $5,000, to do the, test that's needed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
So since you're co-chairs, I guess you only sign half of it.
Yeah.
You only get $250.
Here, I got,
You need this, this is the one you get to sign.
this is this is for the scanner?
Oh, that's the scanner.
That's the scanner, we haven't gotten to the scanner yet.
There's the
This
5,000,
one?
there you go. Here.
Oh wait, I think I have is this an official one? This looks official.
Okay.
Is that scanner? That's scanner. yes.
Okay.
Bill, are you here for the scanner?
I made one.
So I'm glad you're here.
Do I
was
have
gonna
to
bring
sign
up
this?
a matter
Yes.
of procedures. I do notice on here that, it does specify that
Your co-chair.
on the reserve fund transfer request, that there should be some memorandum
Is that
with,
true?
a description
what
of the
I thought.
circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Which I would also take to mean like supplemental information on the type of scanner and, details like that. Have we been good about enforcing that, and could we be? And I would also say that in lieu of actually having supplemental materials to go along with this, so that we know what we're talking about a little ahead of time, in lieu of that, perhaps we could have a representative speak to it, actually attending our meetings. And I think it's, important that we get something more than just $5,000, please. And then-
It's actually 7,600, please. You got the
Well,
wrong
yeah,
paper in
just-
front of you.
yeah. Right, something more than just the dollar amount.
Well, does anyone want to speak to that?
Maybe I just missed it. I mean, I
We
did
wanna
a quick.
get money for dirt, might as well give that too, that's, at least you have a piece of sure.
So I do
Things.
want to say that
Dirt's good.
I have not been direct, I'm Bill Dwyer. I think you all know me.
I think it'd be hard to miss you, Bill.
So I haven't been directly involved on the technical end. Jim Maximowski, who has an engineering background, has been working on that. And John has notified us that he has skills in that area as well. The project, the genesis of our asking for a scanner is that when the townwide computer resources study was done, all of the evening boards were excluded from it. Nobody asked us what our needs were. And in fact, we had needs. We do have needs that we've been doing our own IT planning as a result. And the point that came in as something we could deal with, first of all, a little bit of background. Most of our IT is personal. All of the, there's no town server, as you probably know. The entire computerized records of the planning board reside on my hard drive, my server, and on Jim Maximowski's server.
Well, can I ask a question of David? So, what server drives all of our emails?
That's cloud-based.
Is that legal for all the records to be kept on personal,
Sounds like Hillary.
Well, our files, our paper files are kept at the planning board office. And all, to the extent that we have planning board email, I've made sure it all runs through the cloud, so that's available. But what I will call my work product, everything that I have gathered for the planning board electronically or prepared for the planning board electronically, resides, the original work, the Word documents, were generated from my Word program and live on my server. I'm happy to share them, and I certainly respond to public records requests, but there's no other place to put them. So anyway, we're getting.
So if there's a fire at your house, that's the end of it?
I have backups. I do a rotating backup, so I have a backup drive at home of the server at my office.
Isn't there other departments like CPA doing this as well?
Okay.
CPA, I'm not sure how the ZBA does it that way too, I think, by and large. So that's an area that is an unmet need of the town going
Well, that's why
forward.
we have a whole IT thing going on,
Right, right. So the specific genesis of getting a scanner at this time actually came out of a conversation, an all boards conversation that we were having about 3 months ago.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
And
April, maybe, yeah.
it was actually the select board suggestion that in order to get the ball rolling, we asked for a reserve fund transfer to fund it, since there was money in the reserve fund. So, what do we need a scanner for?
So really quick question on the process still.
Yeah.
When select board suggested it, was there a reason that if this was an unmet need, that it didn't come up through the standard capital planning procedure?
It came up, that's how in the conversation with the select board about the needs of our board, it came up during the very early phases of the budget, as I recall.
Okay.
Part of the budget discussion.
Yeah.
So, as part of the discussion at that early stage of the budget, that was the direction we were given.
So this is not really unforeseen, right? This has been known about for a long time.
It's not perhaps unforeseen, but, let's go back into, the protocols of all of this. We're practically at the end of the budget year, and it's going to be an item going forward. So the question is whether this is the time to move on it, since you have no competing demands for that portion of the funds, which will flow back into the general fund in 2 weeks.
I'm all for you getting it.
If I could get
Helps your process.
a little, I brought some props, just by way of information. This is a typical filing for one project. Let's see, it is color, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pages.
How was that produced? How was that produced?
I don't know how this was produced. It was a CAD plotter of some sort, I assume.
But, so that file exists on the computer somewhere.
Yeah, but people who
Okay.
want to do big projects, bring it to them.
Going forward, we are asking people to submit an electronic file, but we have literally hundreds of these in the planning board office. Tim Nyhart has perhaps over thousands of similar sized documents in his office, and DPW has probably a comparable number down there. So we were envisioning this. The reason we went with this as a starting point was that we envisioned it could be a multi-use item that could be used by other departments. Jim Maximowski did talk with some of the IT people where he works, and I forget exactly where it is. He works for a multinational with a Springfield or West Springfield location. And it was recommended that we consider seriously getting our own or an in-house one, rather than trying to run these over to Copycat or somewhere else, which would have I don't know what they charge for scanning something of this size, but they have to recapture the cost of their scanner as well. I believe there's also some mention that we could look for a used product or a surplus from, but these are specialty items. You don't get these as staples.
But going forward, you're gonna request people come with their large document, both in paper and on some electronic form. So what you're really asking for is a scanner to take care of the documents that are all piled up here, there, and everywhere.
We're looking at archival. We have to, it is a practical matter. Going forward, people will have an electronic copy, but we will still be accumulating paper copies, and you get into some compatibility issues. We have various iterations of Adobe Acrobat, but we don't have CAD-CAM, or there are some really expensive design programs. We're not attempting to design things, we just want to, so we may not be compatible, or not everybody will be compatible with our requirements.
And,
Is there a period of time that you, by law, that you have to keep those?
Pretty much forever.
Exactly, so if a building burns or over time paper turns yellow
Mm-hmm.
or so forth, I deal with this in Northampton, we have an area, many areas with old plans like that, and they are as well scanning them in and making it another form of a copy of that, because we all know if the paper goes away, then there's the information that goes away too, so you always should have a backup.
and this 7,600 is for the scanner, or the scanner and the computer?
At the moment, it's for the scanner.
And is it a suitable computer that's gonna be able to suck in that much data?
We, Jim is willing to use his computer with an external hard drive, which would probably be covered by this amount. The external hard drive would be covered by this. So he's willing to volunteer to insert his computer in for the time being.
Because that seems like it's gonna be a lot of data.
It is, it will be.
And those hard drives will then be stored, again, one in your office and one in
Well,
your
we'll
home, or?
probably, at that point, if we're doing it on premises, we will probably have one stored at the planning board office, wherever that may end up being. And eventually, we are going towards a server architecture for the town. So at some point, we will be able to feed into that and hopefully share the backup protocols for that.
And the human who's gonna run all these things through?
But this year we had a good experience. We had a high school student who was eligible for Pro Merito but did not have community service and options. So he worked with Jim and Joe Zagrodnik and Jim Maximowski for, I think, every Saturday or every other Saturday for about 6 months, organizing our filing and getting that under control.
And you
We
have,
anticipate we would be able to get an intern or volunteer of some sort. We
Or
don't know how
senior?
We do the senior
the tax
program.
work-off might work. It's not going to be highly technical. The task is going to be to unstaple these, feed them through without getting them wrinkled, and then
Does this thing have like a giant
reassemble.
feeder that you, or does somebody have to lift a giant scan bed? and
No,
put-
it does not have a lid. It apparently is, and I only saw the picture of it once, but it is a unit that is this wide, and it has rollers and the scan array is in
And
there.
the scanner comes with the appropriate software and all of that?
I believe so.
Well, because I bought
Do you
compute-
wanna do the, background for them?
Do I wanna do the background?
Yeah.
No, I wanna know that if we spend this money, that it just won't sit there, someone will actually use it and it'll be actually useful.
Well, he's just telling you, we have to keep those records for life, so it's gonna be used,
No, I
right?
agree.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, they already researched it, they're here with a price, and it's either we
Well, so-
give them the money or we don't.
I understand that, but I'm trying to make sure I've been hearing about this scanner for some time now, and it says here, the money that is being requested was the expenditure unforeseen. And it says yes here.
Well,
And it doesn't seem like it was unforeseen. It seems like it was seen.
It was unforeseen to the planning board in the sense that we weren't anticipating that this would be an option.
You just voted on $5,000 for the
That's
soil.
a separate issue.
For property that was well known about last year,
That's a
so
separate issue.
that was foreseen too.
No, because the soil at the current site tested out poorly, so that was unforeseen.
Okay, so moving forward,
Moving forward, that's a different issue altogether.
Do I just hear a motion?
I would like to vote to approve the $7,000 $7,600 for the planning board to purchase their scanner.
I'll second that.
There you go.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So
Hey, Bill?
this is the,
What about all the plans at the top floor of the
Maybe
hooker
when they
school?
get it, they'll let you use it.
I don't wanna use it.
We don't know whose those are.
And I would just
Really?
like to reiterate, apologies if I'm not seeing it in my email, I did a quick search because I have my laptop, but if we could get these details
What's
very
that?
clearly and well ahead of time, so
What
that, because I appreciate Ken's questions, I think they're the right questions to be asking, but with some documentation, we could reveal all that.
Side of that office.
this is the third and final request from Chip.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. We were moved from our office here directly into that classroom,
So we have an HVAC project over at the public safety complex.
Somebody should look at them.
Plans? Someone should look at that. Yeah, you don't wanna scan those anyways.
Can't hear, okay.
So we have an HVAC project over at the public safety complex, which has turned into an emergency repair. If you remember last town meeting, we raised $45,000 for the HVAC repairs for that building. The emergency bids came in at $62,000, so with a contingency, I'm about $20,000 short on this project.
Wait, hang on a second. So you're asking this to come out of the original 50?
No, this is a.
Because there's only 19.4 left in there.
Right. This is not a reserve fund transfer, this is what's called a line-to-line transfer, so we're taking money out of one operational budget and we're putting it into another operational budget. You can do that at the last 2 months of the fiscal year. It needs the select board's approval and the finance committee's approval.
And where's the money coming from?
It's coming from the salaries for the police department.
And
We
the
ha-
police know they're not getting paid?
The police have surplus money. The police have surplus money in their salary, and they volunteered $20,000 in order to make this project happen, so that people, visitors, inmates, equipment can be kept cool in that building during the summertime. We would transfer, the proposal is to transfer $20,000 from police salary over to the building maintenance budget. We would then encumber that money and use it to complete the project.
What is their total surplus in salaries?
They had 3 positions that we funded for an entire 12-month period, and they didn't hire those 3 positions until halfway through the year. So there's 6 months of salary that we budgeted that we didn't actually use.
So what would that total be?
That total would be somewhere around, well, we haven't finished the year, but it's going to be north of $80,000.
And can some of that money be used to offset the firemen that we have hired, that we borrowed the money out of OPEB from?
It would be, any surplus money would be converted into free cash, and then we would appropriate that at the fall town meeting for whatever purpose we need. Firefights
When
would
you
be.
were figuring your figures out, did you figure this into your calculation for free cash when you were coming up with numbers everywhere?
That boosts free cash a little higher than I had anticipated. I talked about a $500,000 free cash figure. If we're seeing 80,000 or more coming back just in that one line item, then that makes me feel a little bit more optimistic.
So you think that 80 is above and beyond the 500,000 that you quoted to us?
You typically get about $100,000 back, maybe $150,000 back from all combined surpluses within the operational budget. Okay, so this is money that we appropriated, but we didn't spend for whatever reason. We didn't have a bad winter. We were able to control overtime, or price of postage didn't go up like we thought it would, or for whatever reason, you hope that you have a surplus that typically is around $150,000 from all sources within the operational budget. If this line item is coming in at 80,000 or even 60,000, that's far higher than I had anticipated. So this is a line-to-line transfer. You can do it in the last 2 months of the fiscal year. It has, it's for a project that we need, so.
Any other discussion? I make a motion to, go ahead and do that transfer.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I think this is the.
Oh, special one.
That's the official one.
That's the official
All
one.
right.
Thank you all. You wanna talk about fall town meeting,
Oh, well,
or what's your pleasure?
that's you. Oh, wait, do we all have to sign this one? No.
Terry.
Terry, that's done.
So I had to skip out early from yesterday's select board meeting. If I could get a brief recap. Apparently, everything happened right.
Yeah. As soon as you left, all hell broke loose.
Yeah, I was looking around for you, I didn't see you, and I thought, okay.
And I learned not to sit in a chair over there.
That's where the camera is.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's where, after he was gone, and you were gone, I was by myself.
The Senior Center Building Committee, who's represented here tonight by Jane, came in and asked that the selectmen schedule a special town meeting for the first week in August in order to address the building shortfall for the senior center.
And what's the value of that shortfall?
That value is between 1,200,000 and 1,000,008 at this point.
Well, we have two, may I speak?
Okay, sure.
Please.
So, we have a budget of $5.3 million, and we originally had a 14,000 square foot building. Working with the architects then, we pared that down to 12,000 square foot building, which they led us to believe was a reasonable size to work from. One of the things that no one on our committee had recognized was the complications in working for a municipality. It's not like I'm trying to build personally this building. There are all these overlay things that happen when you're a government agency. So you have to hire a wage of unions. You have to have these certain markups that go with things. So there was a lot more expense than we had ever anticipated. When you in fact look at the number in the fall town meeting, when this was approved, the building committee had said you should, go for $7.1 million. In fact, that number hits it right on the head. At that point, we just had no concept of all the complications that were gonna go on. Not complications, all of the overlays that were going on. So, okay, that being said, 12,000 square feet was over our budget. To get to the budget of 5.3, we needed to go down to about 9,500 square feet. So, let me show you some plans. This building will work within the budget, but because the vote at town meeting was 297 to 8, we believe that there's a real need for a building to be built correctly. And people on the municipal building committee and others in town are saying, do it right the first time. We've made mistakes before. Don't build something that's too small. Okay, this is the original building. And basically, it's gonna look like this and be a little longer if it's the big building. This is the shorter one. This is the smaller building, which has been designed so that you could expand it back later, which would probably cost way more than what's going on. Basic rooms have been cut out of that building that are not absolutely essential, but they bring a different group. The lounge, the pool table, the fitness equipment. Basically, it's the things, that more guys would come and use than otherwise. So we requested to go to town
That's just
meeting
the same
and
thing.
ask the town if they wanted to spend the money, because they did the first time, obviously, or not. And then we'll know which way to go.
And so this,
So in addition to this is an opportunity for us to exercise our right of first refusal on the Hynoski property as well. So there would be a $400,000 borrowing article associated with that.
so this is actually a borrowing article, so we're asking to increase their amount of the loan from 5.1 to.
Right, this is a capital piece.
7,
Right.
what, 7.3 did you say?
Well, we will ask for 1.8. Should we not use it all, obviously, it goes back, or not get borrowed against.
This isn't exactly asking for an increase in amount, this is a separate article.
Separate article,
For
that
just the
one's
additional
done.
amount, so if this article fails, your other one holds.
And we build the smaller building.
So, there will never be, what are you saying, 7.1, there won't be anything that we vote for that says 7.1. So this is only about the one, or up to
1.8.
1.8.
And
So
what's the estimate of the increase to the taxpayers?
Jane,
We
you
don't
talk-
have that yet, we've only, we've just come onto this recently. We will have that by early next week. Dan's away, so I can't get it
Ah.
until he's back Monday.
Yeah, I sent her down to see Dan.
Yeah.
Well, but, I mean, when you borrow money in the past, you know if you borrow $1.8 million, how much is that gonna cost the taxpayers to,
It doesn't, yeah,
It's not that
it doesn't,
easy
it
to-
doesn't work
doesn't scale like that?
easily, no, it doesn't.
Just a quick question, perhaps if it did fail, I hope it doesn't, but what would you revert back to for square footage?
9,500.
I thought 9,500 is the amount with the increase of 1.8 million.
No, that would go to the 12,000,
So you would go back to the
to
12?
the 12.
Okay, very good.
If you had to go to the 9,500 or stay there, is it the same amount of rooms but just smaller?
No,
What would you be losing?
we would lose the fitness room, we would lose the arts and crafts room, and we would lose the game lounge, if you will. Card room, sit around sort of place.
When this building is being built, cause you mentioned game lounge and things like that, is this building gonna be, those rooms are gonna be available to other departments for use?
I don't have any idea about what the board of directors of the Council on Aging would choose to do. At the moment, I think they will all be filled with seniors, frankly. And because we have so many seniors who are younger seniors, if you will, many of whom are still working, that would be used at night also. So I don't see having it,
What's
I
the-
don't know, we don't know. It's one of those what ifs.
What's the Hadley definition of a senior?
60.
60.
I'm a senior.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, you came on a coal-fired steamship, as I remember, so you're a super senior.
Are there any rooms in your current building being used by other than seniors?
At the Hooker School,
Yes,
many. Planning board is in one, Park and Recs is in one,
other than town rooms?
HPAP is.
Other than towns, do you rent rooms out to other facilities?
The only one that sort of has been handed to us that is not, really compatible is the AA meetings. They pay $25 a month, they have a weekly meeting.
Mm-hmm.
They use more than $25 in one meeting for heat in the winter, for instance, toilet paper. And I don't wanna be rude, but they're not clean people, they drop their coffee and they don't wipe it up.
So, we utilize rooms over there for outside meetings. So what I'm asking is if Park and Rec wanted to use a room one night in a week, would that be accessible to them as just like the AA meetings?
All right, so there's a big difference. Right now, the Hooker School is the Hadley Community Senior Center, Community Senior Center. The new building was voted at town meeting to be a senior center, not a community center.
I think that may be the first some of us are hearing.
Yeah.
I
The difference.
I mean,
Yeah, that's a big
It
difference.
is.
You
And
want
we don't know.
all people to pay for it, so I just don't know why it can't be utilized by other town departments if need be.
Well, I'm not saying it can't, I'm
You
just
just
saying
said
I
it
don't
did because
know.
it's not considered the community
Well,
senior center.
If it works out that there's space, yes.
Well, the seniors aren't there what I'm getting at is the seniors aren't there all night. And that if that facility, the larger facility can be built and that some of that space can be utilized by other departments, that to me is more
easier to
reason
sell.
to make it bigger.
But we're not making it bigger, we're making it the size we wanted to make it originally to meet the needs of the growing senior population in Hadley.
Well, I think you can meet those needs, and also, I mean, you know, it is a town building, so I'm just saying that I would like to see the option be able to be used by other things if need be, if it doesn't interact with the seniors' use.
That I think is reasonable, but I'm not gonna say, first place is not my place to say. But if we go to nighttime programming, then that only leaves weekends.
Well, right, but like I heard you say at the select board the other day, we wanna have meetings earlier because the elderly don't wanna be out late, so,
I'm talking about the younger elders, we're talking the 60 to 65s, like David.
okay. I'm not.
He lives in Greenfield, by the way.
Yeah.
Just as an example.
So back on the building, does
Yes.
the 12,000 square foot plan allow for any expansion from there?
No.
No.
And what was the process of the original budget? I mean, so the original budget is falling short by $1.8 million, so what was the process of
The
figuring out what
original-
you needed in the first place?
It was sort of a fiasco, if you wanna start there. Someone on the municipal building committee said, oh, $3.5 million, you can build this building, approximately
They
this
just
size.
said
On the back of a napkin, he actually said. And he said that at town meeting. But then, once we had an OPM on board, the OPM came up with this, actually 6 days before the town meeting, came up with this number of 7.1, and we all just said, no, you know, we've been talking to people, we've said 3.5, there's no way we're gonna double that number and ask for that kind of money. So, we basically split the difference, and now we're seeing what's happened.
So at the 12,000 square feet, it puts all the original parking back
Well, when the
and the
parking,
egress to get out on Route 9?
that is included in that price, yes.
Okay, I think there should be some discussion with your board and the American Legion, because you could have a big opposition against you. They're losing
I don't know.
almost a third of their parking lot to the egress. The upper parking lot is gone completely, and it's been problematic for them all along with the construction. So I think there's gotta be a channel of discussion opened up with them.
Suzanne has been having that with the commander of the post, and in fact, the upper parking lot is owned by the town,
Correct.
which is on the land that we're talking about building, and there's no reason that the Legion cannot use the parking spaces, cause they're weekends and night times. That would not be an issue,
On the eastern side, there's gonna be parking?
no.
No, it's all gonna be on the western side only, so they would have to walk.
That may change depending upon on what the soil, the second soil geotest shows, we might move the building,
Back to
I
that
don't
again.
know.
Yes, David.
So I'm certainly glad for all the information. I'm wondering what the finance committee's role is on this moving forward.
I was gonna say, we're getting down into the design of parking lots and square footage and things like that. Let's see if we can't bring the focus up a little higher and think about the landscape of what we have to do. All right, so we know we have the Hynoski property. It's an opportunity. It may be a good opportunity, may not be a suitable opportunity. Until we get the soil tests back, we don't know. We have the request for the senior center additional funding. We may have another request coming in, we're not quite sure.
Wait, what's the next, I'm not sure one?
Well, there was some talk in the audience last night about the fire substation. So we have very little time in which to get all of this accomplished. I've asked for a deadline of the August 3rd warrant articles to be June 30th, so like next Friday it's gotta be done, but then we've gotta do all of that vetting, capital planning, finance committee, board of selectmen review, all of that's gotta happen in time for us to post this thing no later than July 20th, which I will remind people I'm on vacation then. You have this electronically, but if you need a copy
Just
of
take
it
a
for
look at it.
tonight's meeting, it's right here.
Remind me of the deadlines that are causing us to do this in August rather than pushing it to fall time meeting?
The Hynoski property would have to get that all settled by mid-September. That was the other projects I raised that question of, you know, you're trying to go back to the voters several times for overrides. You know, don't do it piecemeal, do it in one.
Well, that actually concerns me a lot, that we're gonna be going to the town in August to ask for money, and then we're gonna be having the issues in the fall town meeting where we have an underfunded fire department, and we have an underfunded IT department, and we have an underfunded HR.
We have no HR.
We have no HR, so it's not just underfunded.
Yeah.
There is
Um,
none.
And where all of these projects have merit, how you deliver them to, you know, the requests of the people is important. So,
So again,
I-
besides the right of refusal, what was the reasoning behind doing this for an August special town meeting rather than pushing this into the fall?
That was your request to have it in the first week in
He
August.
said right of first refusal, I think he's talking about.
Oh, I'm
No, I'm saying,
sorry.
sorry, besides that, I can understand why that would have to happen in August
Right.
with the deadlines, but why was the senior center
One
not
of the
pushed to the
things-
fall?
Well, these three things that are on, we're talking about for the special August meeting are all capital things. They're not regular budgetary things. And it's I don't think you have anything in the fall meeting that is a
Library.
a
Yeah.
library.
Library.
The
So
library
why
will be
is it
its
the
own-
seniors can't wait till the fall meeting?
Truly,
Yeah.
yes,
they're dying. They want a new building. That is all I hear since last fall meeting. When will we have our building? And if,
Are you gonna get it any faster if we vote for it in August?
yes,
When would it start?
you know, we're right now at the schematic design phase. Then you have to do design development, then you have to do construction development. Each of those is 4 to 6 weeks in their own right to make sure that the numbers and everything that's specified is correct so that you don't have change orders, if you will, which are very costly. So with any luck,
So there's like an 8-week, what's the difference between August and October?
may I continue? So you have 8 weeks, then it has to go out to bid. If it goes out to bid and the bids are back in early December, ground could be broken before winter really hits. They could have a frame up, shelled, and they could work inside. Otherwise, we're looking at April or May.
so it seems very unrealistic to me if they started in December that they would have that building buttoned up. I mean, if we have a hard December, they're just not
If we
gonna
have
do.
a hard December, that's true, but watching the buildings that happened over here on Route 9, the office buildings, they built those right through the winter. It all depends on what happens with the climate, and that we have no control over. But if we have a choice, that is what we're doing.
So I understand it's a pressing need and potentially could save us a few months by bumping this up.
And cost. Costs are always going up.
True, but to Tom's point, you know, if we have a lot of issues that we're trying to put in front of the voters, we might lessen our chances for all of them if we keep coming back to them rather than rolling this all into one bundle. So it does have to be taken into consideration versus all the other pressing needs we have going on. So I think that's my perspective of the conversation should be right now.
I mean, we have a fire department that is not meeting OSHA requirements and is quite frankly dangerous to the firemen and the people in town. So that's very concerning to us.
May I ask when the last time you walked into the Hooker School was?
The hookers.
Take my walker
Probably
and
about
go
2
into
months
the,
ago.
take my walker and try and navigate that school. It is not a pretty
I'm not
sight.
saying that there isn't a need. I'm saying that there are lots of needs,
Well,
and we're gotta keep all the balls in the air.
the select board has voted to hold the meeting on August 3rd, so that's kind of where we are right now. They also established the fall town meeting for October 5th. And again, you have this electronically, but here's the countdown calendar
Yeah.
for that.
David, I
So-
think it's fair to say that October 3rd, August 3rd date,
Yeah.
at least in my mind, and I can't speak for everybody else, but I think that there's some flexibility around it. That was the requested date. Then there's the practicality of deadlines and legal review, and we don't know when our attorneys are on vacation, because we're trying to cram this through in December, so it may logically drift to the 10th or something, but, you know, that's something, and that's just the reality of it. So from a scheduling standpoint, there's nothing magic about the
Right.
3rd, but we did
Did
vote
you
to have a meeting.
have this in mind based on the property you're thinking about purchasing in in North Hadley before the seniors came and asked to move it up? Did you already have this thought in your mind that we would want to put, not you
Yes.
personally?
Yeah,
It was-
it was, the Hoynoski property was on the agenda, and it was on my mind. I had had a conversation with David about, was there any way to avoid a special town meeting if in fact there was movement and interest in pursuing that property? And at that point, David had not landed it, he didn't know the answer to the question of when the meter had started running at that point, so, yeah.
Basically, the thought from the select board was to have a meeting in August based on that property, and it just came together because the seniors came in and said, well, you know, we need some money, and you're like, oh, well, we could just put it on the August one.
Yeah, I have to be quite
that-
candid here, I can't speak to, I mean, Jerry and John were the other two members who voted in favor of holding this meeting. I only know what was in my head at the time. I had no idea
Well,
when we
this is
opened
what
that
I'm
meeting
saying.
that the seniors were gonna walk in and ask us for a
This is
special
what
town
I'm
meeting.
saying.
Yeah.
You already were thinking that you were gonna have to hold it anyways
Yes.
for North Hadley.
Yes, I knew
So,
that was gonna be a point of
once,
discussion.
that's right, so you're already thinking in advance before the $5,000 is approved for the soil and so forth to have this meeting. It just so happens that the seniors came in. She didn't specifically ask for this special meeting just for the senior housing. It was already in the works anyways.
Yeah, but they actually did.
Well,
Yes,
they
just
didn't know
forgot
that you were
just-
gonna, they
yes.
didn't know that you were already
They were
asking for
thinking
it.
about it, they hadn't
That's
done
right.
anything, and when we
They
came
didn't know that
forward,
you
they
are.
said, okay, then we'll do this and this and that.
Exactly, so it kinda just,
Happened.
oh, well, we can do it for the seniors, we're already planning for this for North Hadley, cause we're hoping to buy it.
Except there was no smile on my face at that point.
Right.
Cause I really didn't wanna have
So-
another special town meeting.
David, what's the finance committee's role in all of this? Are you looking for a document to be signed or a vote to be taken?
No, just to let you know of all the deadlines that we have to observe. So we're really trying to wrap everything up by July 12th. And so as soon as I get the draft warrant together, I'll get it to you for the August 3rd meeting. I have provided you with a draft warrant for the October 5th meeting. Gabriel, I think I owe you a copy, and Terry as well. And it's right here. And I'll send this around electronically. This is just a preview of all the articles that I know that are gonna come up for discussion.
Do you need one?
Well, I'd like to have one to look at while we're talking about this. I think I have one at home, actually. I'll pass it down. Do you guys have one? Do you want?
I got one.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Just from a financial planning, what Tom asked, what is this going to cost? Last time that we did a plan for what these things are going to cost, we didn't do it building by building. I know it came out that way on the yellow sheet that went out to people, what it's going to be, but we started from the point of what are all the things the town needs, put them all in a bundle, do the financing, level it out. So it was a project, Joe. I just wanted to say this is going to take some time after we have the pieces together. So I would like, I think, how many pieces can we get together at once? Two of them just happen to come together at once. We know another big piece of the puzzle out there is the library. That was part of the plan that we did for last year on a certain timeline and with expectation of these other two buildings costing a certain amount. We would need as much information on that again. Now these are separate overrides, these are separate decisions from the budget override, because those are two different kinds of overrides. I'm not saying they don't have impact on households in exactly the same way, but as far as planning and what it's going to cost, they're really approached quite differently. But so as many capital items as we could have together at this same time would be good. So for that reason, it seems to be pushing it later into August. When might we hear on the library grant? I haven't talked to them, I don't know if anyone has talked to
The
them since
library.
last night as to whether, if they got the grant July 15th, would they be ready to go in August? And would we have cut them off in some way by having it August 3rd instead of August 21st?
Yeah, and I mean,
So
we
these-
will know
these-
about the results of the grant.
We
Yeah.
will, but would they
July.
be ready to go, or are they somehow sitting there waiting till October?
The presumption was that the vote would take place at the October town meeting. Yeah, that would be the next key thing, if in fact the grant passes.
January 13th is the drop dead deadline
That's
for
the drop
the
dead.
library,
Okay.
for
and
all approvals,
I- you
that
know,
exclusion included.
I haven't spoken with anyone,
Yeah.
but certainly if I was in that position, I would be looking for, what could we have ready for August so that we have a second chance in October, just as every other building was planning on what they were going to do the next time. So if we have a drop dead date in January, again, I haven't talked to them, but it's just, I think that we should allow for as much capital to come forward at that time, especially these large projects, so that we can give a reasonable estimate of what, again, redo that plan, which, if you remember, we had 3 versions of, and we had David Eisenthal back and forth several times. And he's very good at it, but we want these pieces to be as predictable as they can.
And just so you know, I'm the liaison to the library,
Oh,
and I'm on
okay.
the building committee, so
Okay.
yes, we're going to be talking about
All
that.
right.
So they, yeah.
That
they'll
is
be talking
another
about
piece.
this next
Okay,
meeting.
all right.
So
So-
can I really have
Yeah,
gotta get out, but, so the only thing I was just gonna ask, and again, I've taken an awful lot of Latin over the years, you know, the die is cast here. And so, again, whatever the timing of that is, it's crystal clear to me that this is not an ideal situation, but given it's a farming community, so let's make a silk purse out of a sow's ear here. I think that really what would be extremely helpful as a tri-board, or certainly the finance committee working with the select board, is really thinking as thoughtfully as possible how to position this information for the taxpayers. Because we don't wanna create confusion. However, in my own head, and Linda just said it, I think we can compartmentalize some of these discussions. And maybe it's just because I was, really not happy with the position I personally felt like I was in last night. Call it, maybe I'm trying to justify it after the fact, but I think the more I've thought it through, with a little bit clearer head today, I don't think this is the worst thing, because we will have more clarity around these buildings, that we'll know about the library, I'm sure there is going to be a robust discussion on town meeting floor in August about the situation with the seniors, the substation, the Hoynoski property, assuming that all goes forward. And I think as long as we are abundantly honest to the taxpayers walking into that meeting, that this is what you need to expect when you come back in the fall, we are going to be assuming we're at that point to say that, we are going to be looking for an increase in operating, or we're gonna be talking about funding these operating things. Bear that in mind as you vote, then, I think it can be okay, but.
Well, the assumption there is that the exact same number of people are gonna come, same actual people are gonna come from one town meeting to another, which is,
And the summer's gonna be really hard to pull that off. However, when you have a concentrated number of articles, people think, oh, well, it's only gonna be a couple of hours, I can show up for that, and the seniors will be out in full force, and anybody interested in the fire department's gonna be out in full force. And if this library happens to be on there, so you'll get a concentration. But yeah, I agree, it's not ideal.
I think we absolutely have to know by the August meeting exactly what everything's gonna cost in terms, not just of dollars per project, but how much is your taxes gonna go up? If you're, take the average household, and we have to tell people what's gonna happen. And what's,
But we backed into that.
Yeah.
We did a financing plan
Yeah.
going forward and put things on a certain timeline.
But I
And
think-
then we divided it up and put it out there, so we didn't
But they
go-
need to know, they
Yeah,
already voted
yeah.
for, remember the 95?
We'll do that again.
They already voted for the 95, so then the question becomes, what's the differential with the substation? The library's not gonna change, so what's the differential in the substation,
Right.
what's the differential in the senior center? Is the 95 now become 115? Has the 95 become 200? Has the 95 now 97? That's really important, because again, they already voted for the 95, irrespective of what we're coming to in the fall. Okay,
Thank you.
sorry.
Thank you.
Um, I have a question about the library project.
Yeah.
So there's a grant they've applied for and they hope to hear about soon.
Yeah.
What's the value of that grant?
50% of all the construction costs. So-
Irregardless of what, I mean, there must be some cap on it. You know, we're
yes.
building the Library of
Yes.
Congress, I think somebody's gonna object.
Yeah, so I think that their costs for the library, absent the grant, is somewhere around $7.5 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. So the grant would cover half of that, so we're talking about 3.5 to 375, or the town's cost for that, which is what we use to calculate.
I think that sounds right to me.
Yeah.
I wish I'd looked at it again.
And is that
I've got it here.
is that a solid number, or is that gonna,
It'll be-
so we don't have room for books,
We don't know.
like the
Oh,
UMass
well,
Library?
in terms of furnishings, no, that's not covered by the grant. So the grant would cover the demolition of 50% of the cost of the demolition of the senior center, and 50% of the construction of the new library on the site of the senior center. And then there's furnishings, which would be, they would have to pay for that through separate funding, which they've raised some of that money.
Is that a hard yes or no 50%, or could they come back to us with something lower?
Could be higher, 59%, could be a little lower, 46%. We don't know. July 13th, we will know. That's when we get the news on the grant.
They have a big capital campaign going.
That's exactly
Yes.
As soon as they hear positive on their grant, that's when they go into full swing.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will cover these furnishings and
Furnishings,
other.
yeah, furnishings.
But the town's gonna be on the hook for $3.5 million.
Something like
Mhm.
that.
But that was accounted for in the last fall's meeting.
It's in the 95.
It's
It's
in
in
the
that
90s.
first,
So
it
that's
wasn't
not an
borrowed,
addition.
it wasn't voted for, but when people were told their taxpayer impact, it was included.
That's
3.5, not
count-
those 7.
it's-
Correct.
Yeah,
3.5.
and counted in as 3.5 with the understanding that we're not breaking ground until January 2019. So they may get the award, they may be put on the wait list for actually getting the cash. Once they get the cash, they can break ground.
Not
And-
until we move, thank you very much. Which is another reason to go faster, frankly.
Well, I'm still very concerned about, all the things we've been planning for the last many months, and now all of a sudden, everything's going every which way. Terry, do you have anything to
No?
add? Anyone else?
Good on this for now.
So that's what you missed.
Nope.
That's one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, last night, it was sort of like a bombshell when the Council on Aging came in. And you were there, and it was said in a joking manner, we will go out and get a petition. I think if we forced their hand and said no, they would have went and got a petition, and they wouldn't have had any problem getting the signatures. So I think, it would have been reality anyways, that we still would have had an early date to make a decision on this.
Well, it doesn't matter what we feel or vote, you're still gonna have it in August. You don't,
Yeah, it doesn't
Third.
actually have anything to do with us.
it doesn't
I
have
was
anything to
just
do
trying to
with
point
us.
out how it came about.
And really,
last night.
the select board already was in the works of having a meeting on August 3rd for the property in North Hadley. They just fell into it, that's all. Right? So you guys were already planning on this.
I don't think anybody was
I don't
planning
think
on
anybody planned
anything going
anything. It
into
was,
last
the
night's
The thought
meeting.
was
The Building
there.
Needs Committee
The thought was there,
the
and they
one.
just fell into it, so,
and the Fire Station Committee
good for
made the
them.
proposals.
That's,
Coincidence.
it's coincidence, that's all, good for them.
So would it be helpful to go through the 10 articles very briefly and talk about the fall town meeting?
I guess so, yes.
Do we have,
Yes.
David, when I sent you the email, I attached his email with it and asked for 3 items to be on the agenda, which are not there, so I'm wondering if we can add those to any other business, or do we have to wait until the next
Well-
meeting?
I mean, they fall, the information that you asked for is under the planning for the future, their priorities. That's where it falls into.
Okay, so that's where it is, and you just didn't list them separately?
Yeah.
Okay.
One other thing, at the end of the school committee meeting, they voted that they will submit a capital plan to you people by the 12th. And it's basically gonna be everything that was on last year's,
Okay,
including their number one priority would be a complete renovation of the girls' locker room.
All right, so that's 12th of July?
I'll send you in there,
They'll
check
have,
that
they're just
out.
gonna send it to you
No.
directly,
Okay, all right,
because they don't have another meeting till after that.
okay,
So,
sounds good. All right, so fall town meeting, we always start with Article 1. Article 1 is the finalizing the FY18 budget. This is where we use the free cash that hasn't yet not been certified, and we make any other adjustments. So we know that we didn't sell North Hadley Village Hall, so we actually have to do something about maintaining it. There was
Well,
some,
what's the current,
Well, the fire department's using it still, correct?
yeah, but
Yeah.
that's,
what are its current bills, I guess, is the,
well, there'd be some electricity, a little fire alarm, that kind of stuff. I mean,
And
not
what-
talking about big bucks here, but
and what happened to the notion of, adjusting the doors on the front of the fire department?
that project got a green light, so they should be forging ahead with it. So. OPEB, you know, we cut OPEB in order to fund everything, so I'm putting that back in. So this would be where you put in your extra firefighters if you wish. This is obviously articles.
Well, I thought the firefighters were already in there, we're just backfilling OPEB, that's where we
No, the
stole.
single firefighter's already in there.
Right, the single
But
firefighters.
if you
We
wanna
have
add-
additional, this is where we
What
put it.
about the raises?
Yeah, that would all go in here.
Well, so I have a question. You don't know how much free cash is left yet, do you?
No.
It won't be certified until mid-August.
We should know, sometime in July, a good estimate,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Well, you just got another $60,000 you weren't expecting. From wages.
All right, so this is obviously an article that's under development. As we get further into it, we'll have a better sense of what's going on. Each article is accompanied by a little explanation to talk about why is this important and what do we hope to accomplish. Article 2 is a housekeeping article to transfer fund balances away from unproductive little eddies where the project is done and we've got a few $1,000s left over. We return that to the source. And as you can see, Linda and I are trying to build up your capital stabilization and water reserves. The other one is to adjust the borrowing for, again, we borrowed at a certain amount, we bought at a lower amount. There's a surplus. Let's take care of that. The big winner here is the last one, the Route 9 water lines. We saved about $200,000 by doing this as a project, well, in coordination with the Department of Transportation, so that's very good news there. Article 3, apparently DOR, Department of Revenue, has changed the way that revolving funds are handled. Formerly, you had to vote them every annual town meeting. Now it's done by a bylaw, so this would introduce the bylaw. Again, this is a conceptual article, more of a placeholder, but Article 4 would be the capital article, so this is where all the capital projects would go in. You notice kind of blank right there.
Yeah,
All right, so those capital requests are due on June 30th, except I guess the school's gonna get me, here's 2 weeks later. So as soon as I have that, I'll activate the capital planning committee and we'll populate this with capital. Article 5 is just a placeholder in case we need to use it. The car struck the sewer pump station number 1, insurance is gonna cover it. By law, you have a $150,000 cap on insurance expenditures without a town meeting vote, so if it goes higher than 150, and I don't think it will, we need a town meeting vote to authorize that spending. Article 6 is the library, $3.5 million. Article 7 is proposal to withdraw from the HCOG. This is something that we passed over at the annual town meeting. So we obviously want to have a debate about that.
Okay, do you wanna speak to that a little bit? No?
Well, it's sort of on hold now, there's a lot of things being implemented. I guess a point of interest would be Belchertown, they had a vote, and they voted to stay in the COG like 169 to 42. So they're not going out. So, but we'll have more information for the fall town meeting in
So,
the next few weeks.
Will you be making a presentation at fall town meeting on the pros and cons of
I'll be
coming or
making
going?
it to the board first, and then the board will make a decision what they wanna do.
Do we have any more clarity yet on the town's liabilities by staying or withdrawing from the COG?
It's pretty certain that our health insurance plan is segregated from the troubles that are going on with the HCOG. The HCOG has got some solvency issues, and I don't mean to make light of that. They really have some problems with their finances right now. To the best of my ability to discern this, I don't think that the liability of the HCOG will descend to the municipalities. I just don't see that happening.
And is there any reason why, I've heard a lot of positive things about the Franklin
Yeah.
County COG. I've heard some negative things about the HCOG. Why do we not drop the HCOG and go to the Franklin one? I mean, I'm just curious
I
if
would-
we're,
I
because
would-
we're in Hampshire County, we're stuck with the H?
I would love that,
Or can we switch?
yes. I would love that. There's
Why
so
would
much,
you like that?
there's so much value that comes out of the FERCog. They do planning, they do health inspections, they do build regional building inspection programs, they have a grant writing program, they have regional services, their procurement is top-notch. They do studies that, we're still struggling to do things that they finished doing 20 years ago. So interoperability of emergency communications, they solved that. We are still struggling with the transportation studies. They've addressed that, and whereas we're still struggling with ours. They're just so far ahead.
So has it been brought up in the past that, to look into switching?
Yes,
And,
I'm very gung-ho about it.
no, but why hasn't it been looked into, or has it been looked into?
I think we're trying to get to clarity on where HCOG is going, because without a whole lot of effort, HCOG could be as good as FERCog, I think, in my estimation. So regional accounting would be a possibility. Regional human resources is another possibility.
But Franklin already has all those things, and if those were things that you would have liked to have seen, why
Yeah.
hasn't it been?
Now, are we on a contract,
addressed.
maybe a
Yeah.
yearly contract?
Yes,
So if we probably have to give certain notice, so,
that's
Is there-
that's the article there.
right? So is there any way that we could switch and go to the Franklin and reap those benefits, and then the HCOG starts doing better, and all of a sudden they do wonderful, can't we switch back? If it's only a yearly contract?
Anything's possible, given the will and the time and the money, so
So is that, can that option be added to Article 7?
it can be, yeah.
Because if you're saying, here you're giving the people the choice to stay or go from the HCOG, but
Yeah.
there's no,
Alternative.
there's no alternative.
Mhm.
Like if you leave the HCOG, then what,
Yeah,
So I think there should be options.
yeah. When I came from Deerfield down to here, this was the first thing I noticed, is that we didn't have the FERCog. That just makes your life so much easier.
How many years ago was that?
I'm in my 12th year.
So it definitely warrants more conversation, and
Yeah.
will probably come up at a tri-board meeting.
Absolutely.
Especially as we have more information.
The
Which
big
is-
difference is between the two COGs. Franklin has an avenue for revenue, and Hampshire County is relying on the electricity program, which is so volatile, it could go one way or the other drastically overnight almost. And that is the big problem. They don't have a mechanism. So much is brought in for grant money because they have their own planning department. Hampshire County has a Pioneer Valley planning department we use. And that's where they derive most of their funding, through that mechanism.
But still, I mean, if we're talking about an article, whether we're gonna stay or go, we should also have, you know, where we would go to.
First time I've ever heard we could transfer into
Oh.
Franklin County. I don't know if it's possible or not. I think you have to be a member of Franklin County to be a member of their COG.
I had a conversation with the executive director and that's not gonna be a problem.
Maybe that's something for further discussion. I never even knew that was an avenue.
No.
David, can you find out definitively, you know, that that's absolutely possible or not?
Mhm.
Because there's no point in talking about it if it can't happen.
Okay.
And maybe is it gonna be a lot more, does it cost a lot more if it's a comparable price? Yeah, right, 'cause we're getting.
Yeah, we need a, you know, an analysis of costs and benefits.
Hmm.
Absolutely, worth doing. Article 8, the OPEB liability trust fund. Now, this is something that's still under research right now, may not be the best way for us to move forward. We do have a trust fund. It's got about $487,000 in it,
840.
800.
No, say, it says
Did I
800.
get that wrong?
Yeah, I thought I heard you say
Did I say
400, but
480?
I think you did, that's
It's that
845, we want credit.
The dyslexia going on here. 845,000 is right there.
Right.
So we don't know if this is the right time for this or not, but just wanted to put it out as a placeholder so that we didn't lose track of it.
We have advisors who are still out, the jury's still out on whether, the issue is we got on early. We adopted the OPEB statute early, so
Yeah.
we're one of the originals. Then they changed the statute, or they improved the statute, but they said those who are already in didn't need to go to the new statute. So our question is, well, what's the advantage then? If we don't have to, why should we? So we're part of a small group that maybe have seen more benefits under the old one. So we've got our advisor who's supposed to get back to us in the next week or so and give an updated, all the regulations weren't out yet, so you really can't do this benefit analysis, the cost benefit, which is the better way for our town to go. So we're still working on it.
Great.
All right, Veterans Tax Work-Off Program, very much like the Senior Tax Work-Off Program. This is something that came out of our research on the seniors, that there was a veterans option as well. We didn't have enough time to look into it for the annual town meeting, so it's here to explore whether it's worth doing for the veterans as well.
I think that's great, and down the road, maybe even, we have like internships for kids?
Yeah,
Tax work off for kids?
No, well, not tax work off, but like they get,
I'll send my kids over, they can work off my taxes.
they get grades for, for school or something.
From Merida, they need to volunteer hours.
Work study type of thing?
well, under the veterans program, if the veteran is unable to do the work, somebody else can pitch, be the designated hitter, and do their work for them.
Within the family,
Yeah,
I think it is, isn't it?
Oh,
yeah, can
interesting.
be anybody.
I thought it had to be a household, oh, okay.
Not the way I
All
wrote
right,
it,
well,
not the way I wrote it
interesting.
up.
So that's 9 articles.
And then 10th would be the CPA. I know that there's at least one ask for $400,000 from CPA for the athletic fields over at Hopkins Academy.
Mhm.
There may be 2 other requests coming in.
I thought Citrus Field wanted more money too.
They may not be in a position to request, I don't know.
So what I didn't see was the fire department, and I didn't see
Mm-hmm.
any of those things that we've all been talking about for a long time.
That would be Article 1. So
Can you make
I
sure,
didn't write that stuff down, but that's where it would all go.
It would all be bundled into Article 1?
Yep.
can you make sure the employee, non-contractual employees, can you give us a figure what their raises will be? Calculate too?
I'll work with the select board on that. That information is in the budget book. I've put in a COLA and a step for each employee. So if you look at the budgets for each department, you'll see what those costs are. You'd have to go through the exercise of tallying all that up, but it's,
Right,
that
won't you do
information's
that to
right
put
there.
that there?
I'll have to ask the select board.
Can, you have all these line items in here, but can you also put line items for the day professional fire department? And
Yeah,
IT and HR and all the other things that we've been talking about, so
Yeah.
that they don't just
So the select
blow
board
by.
doesn't approve,
With little X's?
so if the select board doesn't approve those items, they don't go there, correct?
it's their warrant.
Yeah.
So they sign it at the end of the day.
It is the budget, though.
Yeah,
That's right.
I mean, those
So,
are
I
all
mean,
in
if
the
we have
budget.
no say in it, why work so hard at it? At
You
the
do-
end of the
you
day,
do
the
have-
select board
you-
decides,
you do have a say, you get to recommend or not recommend,
okay,
right? And obviously, we'll work collaboratively together in order to come up with a proper budget that is balanced.
well, I don't see how it's gonna be balanced when we can't, so many things going here, here, here,
Well, that's
everybody
why-
wants money.
They
Well,
sure do.
It's kind of like a big bucket of popcorn, it all ends up in one bucket at the end of the day, doesn't it?
No, it ends up on the
No.
floor and the kid has to sweep it up.
Work with me on that.
I've seen popcorn, it always ends up on the floor.
Alright, so what's next on the agenda? I think it's the priorities, unless there's other.
There are the three things that you wanted to talk about.
Well, most of them are sort of planning things, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, we have all these, we've been through the priority list and we ranked the priority list
Mhm.
and we've poked at that list and we've done all these things, but what we haven't done is try to figure out how we're gonna pay for any of those things.
Mm-hmm,
And I think, you know, the rubber's starting to meet the road here and we need to figure this thing out.
mm-hmm.
There was talk of having someone in to talk about how you do overrides. What, you know, is that on the schedule? Is that person gonna materialize before, say, the August town meeting? So we, you know what we're talking about?
I can't promise August, but I can promise before October, that's for sure. I did talk to Sandy Pooler, who currently is the assistant town manager for Arlington. Formerly, he was the finance director for Amherst, and before that, he was finance director for
Have you been in
Newton.
contact with this person?
Yes, I talked to him. He and I go way back, so he has agreed happily to come out and help us with that information.
Well, maybe what we should do is schedule a finance committee meeting with this person so that
Yeah.
we can actually have them come and talk to us and make
Mhm.
a presentation as to what our options are, so we know what they are and what the downstream effects are.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like a lot of things happen and no one knows why they happened or how they got so wrong, and we need to be ahead of that game now.
Mm-hmm.
And I would really like, if it's at all possible, to have that done before, you know, have that meeting at least with us before the August meeting,
Mm-hmm.
town meeting.
Okay.
I
Was
realize
there a
that
tentative-
short. Say again?
Sorry, was there a tentative date range for when Mr. Fuller would be able to come out?
Well, we didn't talk about that on the telephone. The way we left it is that I would do a check-in with you and with the select board to find out what would work for a good time to come out. Sounds like we need to make that happen in July.
Well, because, I mean, a lot of things as of yesterday's select board meeting have been pushed forward, so now this has to get pushed forward too.
All right, so we'll work on it for sometime in July. All right, so you have a meeting on July 6th and
20th.
20th. We have a tri-board on the 12th.
I mean,
We may find ourselves doing something towards the end of July. So,
yeah, please do.
And of course, he's welcome at our meetings.
yeah,
Yeah, that would be the most convenient, right?
right. So I'll try to set that up.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, there's no budget for that cap.
5-cent deposit on that.
So we can keep going through the priority list, but also there were 3 items that we had on the
Well,
agenda
they were-
that rolled into this?
Well, there were, let's see if I can find that, exactly what I wrote here. And for some reason, my email password doesn't work, so this makes it a little bit more difficult.
It was change your password day on the town, about yesterday, in the last couple of days. And there's, I can talk to you later if you're having trouble.
Well,
It's tricky this week.
Hadley, is it?
Oh, is that what you mean, the Wi-Fi one is just yeah,
No,
I
he's
thought he meant the
talking,
email. He
he's
said email
talking about
password.
his
my
email.
my
Which is
email
email?
password.
yeah. I was
Yeah.
having a problem. Bill
You
was having
emailed
that
me
problem.
from your private email, I believe.
Let's see if I can find this. A second, I saw-
Well, while you're looking. for that.
I'm almost
Are you
there.
almost there?
Well, go ahead, go ahead and
Well, I
say
was just
whatever you want
saying,
us.
the other thing that we did a lot talking about, it seemed like, was the organizational chart
Mhm.
and what to do about that. And I think that, you know, if we look at that as a whole, it is places you can look at possibly saving money too.
Mhm.
You know, and especially if we're gonna be hiring people, I think that's something we have to talk about. I mean, and I don't know, I just looked out and I don't know how up to date they are, but there's the organizational charts we can pull from all the towns. I mean, I saw Amherst right on Google,
Mhm.
they're all out there.
Yeah.
So how much support could we get from the MMA moving forward? So to follow up, there was a discussion about putting together essentially a subcommittee or an informal subcommittee between finance committee, select board, and possibly school committee if they feel they would be affected in investigating, possibly, changes to the charter, what that would involve, what it could look like for the organizational structure of the government of Hadley. So my question is, how much kind of leadership is there in the MMA we could get in, I'm sure they've helped a lot of towns kind of go through this,
Mhm.
versus us individually doing our own research on Google.
That
Right.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So the MMA does have a form of government committee, and there are 2 managers on it, both of whom have come out and spoken to the select board. There's Bill Keegan out of Foxborough, no relation to Molly, and Tim McInerney out of Grafton. Both of them are seasoned, credentialed managers. They've seen it all. They have offered to come back out and talk to us, and I think it's just a matter of picking up the phone and asking them to come by.
And so do they operate on more of a, I guess, education and best practices level, or an actual kind of more consulting?
Both. They provided general overview and guidance as to how to do it. The 2 takeaways was that every town does it differently, and take your time. You should be spending at least 1 year, if not 2 or 3, in this process. Don't try to rush it through. They also provided us with a paper from Clark University on forms of government, which I happen to have electronically in hard copy, so I can send them around. It's worth reading that, because that's very helpful. And they're plugged in to the larger manager network, so if they don't know the answer, if they know of a resource, they can contact them and bring them in to help out. So,
Well, I mean, it's very confusing, the whole thing to me right now of how Hadley works, because sometimes, some departments, maybe, let's look at fire, they has the right to hire fire, set do
Mhm.
the salaries, do all that, he can take charge
Yep.
of his area, but police can't.
right,
School can, right?
yep.
But
Yeah, so how did this all
town-
happen?
Town government can't, I mean, administrator can't, but, so it's confusing, and even Park and Rec they can hire people.
Within the park.
When, I mean, for their department,
No.
No.
right? Well,
There's confusion there, and it either needs to be looked at, rewritten, redefined, because as it states now, those commissioners can only, anything pertaining to a park, so not personnel within the office or programs.
okay, so it was confusing that which departments can, which departments can't, what makes one better than the other, why can we have more uniform? It seems like, and I think, especially not just uniform between departments and what the authorities are, but more uniform with the committees too, as a
Yeah, I
whole.
mean, I think in terms of Park and Rec, one of the reasons is because you don't want them to have to come to the select board every time they wanna hire a coach.
Oh, absolutely, I agree with
That
that.
would be
Well,
crazy talk.
that's what your coordinator is
Yeah,
for,
yeah.
not they don't do that now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there definitely has to be more definity there, especially, like she says, for financing or wages and all that. I mean, everybody should be on the same procedure level. Granted, school teachers are union, and then you got the police union and so forth, but all the town non-union employees should be all on the same thing. But also came Park and Rec, if you weren't at the select board meeting where I was there, the select board decided to give them the rights of hiring the next person, even though technically it's not up to the commissioners, but they have done it consistently in the past year, so there needs to be more explanation there. But while we're talking about that, since we were supposed to be looking at each department, and I still am a firm believer in each department, I was looking back and reading some things that when we were forming a DPW, thoughts were out there what departments could be under that umbrella of a DPW. And Park and Rec was one of them. And the only reason I talk about Park and Rec right now is because they're in a transition. They have no building of their own to provide space
For their programs, yeah.
for their programs. So they do offer programs? Yes, they do. When they can use the school, or they can this is why I was asking about the senior center, when they can get other places to use the facilities. The commissioners really have nothing to do when it comes to, or at least I didn't, when it becomes to providing those programs. That's what your Kathy did. So the commissioners, I thought, were always, a volunteer as needed or an advisory board to the coordinator. But so looking back, if you look at if they were considered to be put under the DPW umbrella, I think they were one. I think cemetery was, not cemetery, but maybe it was cemeteries was looked at as another one. So if that were to happen and say those things could go under there, then you would get rid of basically you would just, for Park and Rec, need to hire like a consultant, give her an office to do the programs, and then you would get rid of all the other expenses, right? Is that how it works? How would it work?
Maybe.
Well, I think that's a good thought, but I mean, we have to have more uniformity. And that is where I'm saying you could probably save money. There's a lot of different
Well, this
things
is
out
what
there
I'm
you could
saying,
probably
so,
save
and the
some
only
money.
reason it's brought up too is because now we're in a position that we could look at that department, because Kathy did leave and we have a transitional employee there, not a full-time employee. So you could look at that department to say, what is the future of that department? What is needed? Maybe it's not a 30-hour-a-week person. And shared services, for shared services.
Sure. Good idea.
And then you look at their budget, it's $67,000, right? Or this might be old, so just say you could save that, and it could be run a little differently. But of course, as the town grows, things could change, and you might have to implement something different. It would be great if we had in my opinion, I know it's not been voted for, one building, seniors on the first, library,
Yeah.
Park and Rec, and then hopefully you would have some space that you could have programs for the seniors, and you could have programs for the children, and
have only one
Well,
parking
right.
lot to plow and so on.
Yeah, but right now your Park and Rec's kind of in a limbo because, you know, they have office space, but none of their programs are held out of there. They have, and, you know, I just feel like it's a good opportunity, or each department you can look at using that as the example,
think-
like you said, of where we can save money. And that's also changing the form of government too, because then, like, the sewer commissioners, you don't have sewer commissioners anymore, right?
Correct.
Because it's all
Right.
umbrellaed under the DPW. So there was a cost savings there, I think. Don't quote me, I'm not quite sure. So, you know, I don't wanna get rid of any volunteers because we all can volunteer, you know, when we want to.
No, but we had, even just before, I mean, you noticed that there was a committee that was formed that wasn't being used.
Right.
That weren't meeting. So, I mean, when we're looking at this, there might be others.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I
There's
agree.
definitely a lot of conversation we had, and I appreciate all the comments on the financial angle. I think that's where we really have the responsibility. So looking at meeting with the MMA, the sooner that can come up, the better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the discussion was around having one, possibly two representatives from interested parties, finance committee, select board, possibly somebody from the public, if it gets to do that. But not 3 or more, so that it's not like a quorum issue. Not that we don't want transparency, but just for scheduling and efficiency and communication and all this kind of stuff.
Well, if you post it, then we can all be there to ask questions.
Still, I think the idea behind it was have a representative, a liaison, to bring back this information for discussion at meetings rather than kind of a committee having its own deliberations, if that makes sense.
It does, but if we all wanna be there, then what do you do?
True, yeah, and especially for bringing out, you know, people from the MMA, that's one thing, it'd be best for a tri-board meeting ideally. But in terms of constant communication and information gathering, you know, before and after,
Mhm.
designing a small task force, I think would be most
I
efficient.
think that was the charge that I heard out of the select board, is that the select board were not particularly interested in looking at changing the form of government, but they were not opposed to a small group, looking for that information that,
Yeah.
that may illuminate the conversation further. A good touchstone would be the service delivery plan. That's as close a thing as you have to a charter, as we have.
So the hour is getting a little bit late, and I did wanna just bring up these points. We're obviously not gonna debate them tonight, cause it's almost 9 o'clock, but, and we have touched on some of these things already, but how, you know, so the question that I had was, how are we gonna determine the amount of money required to satisfy the town's needs according to the priority list? Cause we keep talking about, we need this, and we need that, and we need the other thing, but no one's ever said,
How much?
here's for this, here's for that, here's for the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
How do we determine what the costs of all these things? I mean, the firemen, we know what the salaries are, so that's one that we do know the cost of. But do we have an estimate on IT, and do we have an estimate on HR and the other, and any other thing that we wanna throw on the pile?
Yeah.
I mean, we need to know what those numbers actually are.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think I saw those numbers in the DLS reports that we got regarding IT and HR specifically. Were those in there?
No, they weren't there.
So I know last night there was a lot of talk about IT and HR and moving forward, looking at possibilities for regionalization and kind of other options, possibly with the HCOG and, you know, ambulance obviously has an impact on fire. But I agree, I'd like to see maybe a starting figure, if we were just add IT, add HR, add these services we need, what would be the number we're working with?
Yeah.
And then from there, regionalization would help, and, you know, there's all these creative options. But I'd rather start with what are the needs and what is the cost.
Yeah, so the second point was how do we increase the town revenue to accomplish these goals? But we've already discussed that, and we're gonna try and have that fellow come and talk to us about overrides, so that takes care of that.
But, and just to jump back on the HR, I have a question for Linda. Like, right now, Joan does, most of all the HR, right?
She does all of the, employee benefits, and, she does all the payroll, and I back her up on that. And the other part of HR is dealing with,
Discipline.
personnel issues, well, yeah, personnel
So the
related
department heads
issues,
or
and that's,
David would do that.
so it's really, and a lot of they're really between the three of us. and disproportionately, I don't play an equal role in that, but is our office. So it's divided up, and then there's a element of it over in the school too, because they have to handle a lot of their own issues, but they are very interested in participating in something that we can share back and forth.
So with you and Joan, like, does that take up a lot of her time or your time? Does it take up a majority of it?
A majority, if, most of Joan's time.
So
Most.
if, would it be someone that, like, if we're looking at HR, would it be moving her to HR? You know, I'm just saying, or would we be looking for additional person and then she would have, would it cut her, what she does and make her a part-time spot, or?
I don't wanna speculate too much about, because we're talking about an individual, but
No,
that's
no,
an
no,
option.
or her, no,
That's-
maybe her duties,
That's certainly.
Her position,
her
yeah.
position.
Joan
Uh,
does everything.
She does
she-
everything.
Joan's position is everything.
She does.
It is.
She does, she is phenomenal. And I think that, I wouldn't wanna make HR plans without incorporating the talent that we already have on board. It's not like you say, oh, someone says, well, maybe 80,000 you get it, or whatever the cost would be of HR. Well, bring that person in and give them an office and see what happens. That's not taking advantage of what we already have. And so as, you know, one thing I can't help but listening to talking about the charter reorganization and all that is, and I'd like to see a little bit more of a, from the ground up, what have we got to work with? And a little bit more along the way Terry's thinking of, okay, here's the situation we have right now, how can we make this better? And can you talk to the people in town hall and those of us who are dealing in HR and say, how could you run that better?
Yeah.
And we've already taken another step. We certainly within my office recognize that Joan is HR and I'm
Right.
doing the treasury stuff as opposed to what people think of as a treasurer, assistant treasurer. It's not really, it's just doesn't run that way. So yes, you could give her that. Now the other step that we took recently is something that David talked about at select board last time, not last night, but the meeting before, is this company that we have on retainer as a backup source. Now with that, in fact, Joan called them today on a question. It was really helpful, because one thing that's hard about any individual taking a role is who else do they have to talk to? Where would I get this answer? Am I doing the right thing? And especially in HR, that is sort of, you know, you wanna talk about the situation a bit. So with them as a backup,
Yeah.
some reworking of how our office runs, whether Joan is able to do something with the school too. Would that leave a gap? Yes, it would. Could we fill it? Yes, with a different person altogether, you know, with a clerical person in some ways. So, I mean, and how does that impact the rest of town hall? Let's talk to them. Is there a shared clerical position that we can do there? I'd really like to see a lot more done at the, I mean, I think one of your early steps as you're looking at reorganization is to talk to the people that are here and say, how do we think it would run better?
Yeah.
We don't even really spend that much time talking with each other, obviously Joan and I and David on that issue, but you know, I'd love to see that approach. And I think that there are things that we can do with personnel and with the talent that we have here and get an HR department going, short of, okay, new department, you know, let's send out and get the, you know, a resume and top of the line, put them in there, and they have no assistants, they have no computer, they have no goodwill to ride on, you know, they have no connection, they don't know who the employees are. I honestly think we'd be better off working with what we, you know, the way it is, only improving that.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever thought about the idea of outsourcing the HR functions?
Yes. And that's what, this was well, you wanna talk about that, David? Because this is part of, this company can provide even more services. They're anything from consulting and saying, what do we do about this situation today? Or how do we handle this benefit? Does this qualify under ACA? Or come in and do it for you. So it's a whole range of services for a price. It's
For a price.
it's a la
Well, I
carte.
mean, cause I just took a new job and they sent me for an entire week, which was nothing of me sitting there with HR people for an entire week. And so there's,
And who weren't even in the company?
no, they're in the company,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's,
Because my son had a job, and our HR is done uptown.
well, yeah,
They go
so
up there
I
and
had to
talk
go
them when you're all
I
set,
had to go
come
to
on back and
Buffalo
start working.
Grove, Illinois to get this particular group of training, but they cover all of Leica Microsystems for US, every office. So they're essentially an outsourced HR office, right? They're in the company, but
Right.
they take care of everyone all over the place. So I was just wondering if there's a situation where is there some regionalized group that takes care of HR for various towns or various municipalities and things like that, because there's, you know, gazillions of things that HR does that I'm sure are just not getting done.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, we will go to-
yeah, so that,
Yes.
that would be an excellent thing for a COG to do, is regional.
Does the
Yes.
do the two cogs that we discussed, either one of them do that?
I think that the HCOG does not, I can tell you that. I'm not
They're
sure,
discussing it now.
is
for an HR
FERCog,
position.
does FERCog provide that?
Yeah, I think they do.
Alright, maybe they do, I don't know.
Well, that's another, well, that's something to consider
Yeah,
then.
There's different ways of having help like that, you know,
Yeah.
whether, again, whether they're there for a resource for you, whether they're coming actually sitting there 2 days a week, or whether they're,
Well, because I'm trying to figure out what the workload is compared to, you know, what you want to pay for it, right? So is it a full-time position for someone here? Is it a full-time position for two people? Is
Well,
it
we have
is
to
it
talk to the-
80%?
Yeah.
You know?
if we involve the school, it's a higher
I
number of
think
hours
you
than
could
if we're separate.
full-time for shared town school, would
Plus,
be my opinion.
No question,
So
no
I think,
question.
it seems like it's pretty high on everyone's priority list, if we could have this as a standing kind of item on every finance committee meeting,
Yep.
I think the best way to go about it would be kind of tackling one at a time. I appreciate, you know, the kind of the grassroots bottom-up approach and enhancing what we currently have. Regionalizing with HCOG, FERCog, like, all these options sound promising, so I think if we tackle them one at a time with a deliverable, so starting with the what would a full HR department kind of top-down approach look like with costs, and then next meeting, we have that, okay, move on, what does HCOG, FERCog look like?
well, you-
Obviously, it doesn't line up always time-wise, but
Right.
the most we can really do to keep ourselves moving forward.
well, like, so we have issues that, you know, I've heard about anecdotally, and so I won't go into them specifically, but one thing that an HR department or person would do is make sure that when the town does hire someone, that all the rules are fired, and that it was advertised properly, and that people had a chance to apply to it or not apply to it, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that person qualified?
A lot of things get away from us, there's.
You know,
Okay.
I mean,
Scales.
Yeah.
every modern company in the whole world has a drug test for every person who gets hired, and, you know, it's like,
Corey checks for various positions.
That's right,
too,
you
it's
got-
like, who's thinking of that, you know, it's, and I'm not saying it's not being covered, but those kinds of things come up and,
It might be covered, but it's not consistent in,
right. I haven't
Across
seen
the board.
I haven't seen a checkoff list somewhere, but,
Right.
and maybe it exists over
You know,
various departments, but it's something that should be consolidated.
if an employee feels that they've been mistreated in some way, is there some, what do they do?
It's hard.
So, it is 9, so I just wanna get us.
Oh,
so
okay, here you.
if people wanna get it out at 9, so for next meeting, HR specifically, what did we wanna look at or get information on to have a discussion on specifically? I proposed the, kind of, the numbers, the top level, what would an HR department look like, and an implementation plan based on the DLS report that we got, look like as a starting point.
Well, can we, so if we're asking for information, can we, if we're gonna be asking information about that, we can maybe review the fire department's request numbers and possibly, what anyone's thinking about for numbers for IT,
Mhm.
and then have those as a discussion for next
Okay.
time.
Alright,
Cool. And then after that, maybe the next meeting, we meet with staff and kinda get a bigger picture, and do you wanna take all
And
that into
then,
consideration?
and we have our meeting with the override
yeah.
person, see if you can get us some information on that.
Okay.
I'm sorry to like jack up your to-do list, but
No,
it's
you all
what they want us to do, I think.
You all remember that I'm not gonna be around with you,
For a couple weeks.
in July. So, but please go ahead and meet. Do you all have keys to this building?
No. Do you?
no, and I don't want them.
Alright,
Well, so,
Which
maybe
we,
one
which you have to
co-chair
issue
should-
with, I can make sure.
We could probably meet at the, wouldn't be an issue to
Well, I
meet
don't
at
know
the,
that you have to come
safety
to every meeting,
complex, that's
David,
where we
right?
always used to meet.
well, but
no, I don't.
They have to-
No,
It's
they
actually
do the
part of my
TV and all
job
that.
They have
description.
stuff at the safety complex.
Well, you can be excused at times if
Thank
you
you.
like.
well, cause I was wondering if they could open the building. Do you have keys? here.
Linda just said she can come.
Oh,
She's
well,
gonna
but
come to our
but you're here
meetings.
so much, he has to come anyway.
No, she just said the meetings that David's not gonna be able to attend, she'd come.
Oh, okay.
So if you have any questions.
All right, thank
Is
you.
that,
Yeah, that's
make
fine.
sure, get that right.
All right,
So make sure they get posted before you go.
absolutely.
Before heading out though, really quick, was there a third thing on your list?
Well, the third thing on my list was, what's the actual feasibility of getting any of this done for the October meeting?
So maybe that is the first thing we should talk about next meeting.
Okay, so I'll put my third thing up to the top.
All right.
Because, I mean, when I wrote that list, that was before the events of last night. And now I feel like everything's all up in a tizzy.
Again, if you're gonna ask for money, don't keep going back. You need to kinda coordinate it and do it, in my opinion, all at once. Give them a grocery list, explain everything.
Well, that's not gonna happen. The select board voted on that last night, and that's not gonna happen.
What's not gonna happen?
Just
It's gonna be
time,
August
too.
4 and October 10th. There's gonna be 2 town meetings.
Yeah, that's not what I'm
they can
saying.
be a
I'm
little
saying that
flexible.
if you wanna get all these things done, HR, IT, and all these things, it costs money, how are you funding it?
Well, that's what the questions were. You know, that's why we're having
There's no,
David.
you can't balance the budget now, there's no funds there, you need to look at each other
Well,
department to see where we can save funds.
That's why we're learning about overrides
But
too.
we need-
And then, but what I'm saying is, if you're gonna ask for money for other buildings and so forth, it'd be nice to include all these other things at the same time.
Well, I mean, when I wrote this, I was concerned about the feasibility for October. The feasibility for, I mean, we're talking less than 6 weeks.
In my opinion, once they get their first tax bill with all this stuff in there, if you don't do it by then, and then you wanna come back and raise their taxes again to help fund all these projects,
that's
the
my
answer
concern.
will be no.
I think we're
Well,
on the
that's,
same page.
we're on the same
Wanna
page.
try to
That
do
was my
everything by
concern about
October.
having an August meeting.
You know, we're getting closer and closer. We haven't even got our act together with 218 yet. We're still trying to fund that.
I just said that.
219 is gonna be such a nightmare, it's ridiculous.
Exactly.
Everybody right now is special interest groups that are scampering, looking to get their piece of pie before the inevitable happens where the taxpayer says
No.
enough is enough. And that isn't very far away. I've talked to some of my colleagues on the board, and I'm not even sure if they will support an override.
All the more reason to do our due diligence on our priorities.
Exactly, you know, and
Well, that's why I wanna know how much all this stuff's gonna cost.
Yeah.
In real numbers, not in,
And that will be the only way you can support what everything you're talking about is with an override. Without it, it's an impossibility to balance 219.
If you don't have a building with all your offices that runs efficiently, your employees are discouraged. It's probably costing more money than it would be to implement these other things and ask the taxpayers. So we're asking for all these other things. I think that we need to look right here, right, what's around us and our employees too. Because without them and without this building, the town does not run.
I agree, but I think we need to be doing both. Big charge, but we meet so often.
I mean, you can only put the stuff in this building off for so long. How many years? It's not just, it's falling on our lap now, but it should have been looked at a long time ago.
well, that's how I feel about the North Hadley Hall.
Well,
I'd love to be able to just use that building.
Well, not just North Hadley Hall, you got one across the street here.
Yeah.
It's all the buildings.
So, 9:07, anything else, or is there a motion to adjourn?
I vote to
We're
adjourn.
gonna call you Mr.
Second.
Clock.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you all for your help tonight.